Shabbat Shalom, and today we are celebrating Tu B'Shavat, which was the 25th of January. On Tu B'Shavat, we celebrate the new year of the trees. We rejoice in the fruit of the trees and in the fruit of the vine. We celebrate the wonderful gifts of the natural world provided by God, gifts that delight our senses and give our bodies life. At such a time, it is also appropriate to consider the commandments of God concerning first fruits and tithes from our produce. Torah is careful to draw distinctions between various types of produce as it defines the commandments concerning tithing. Tithes, which literally means tenths, but it's on our produce, and they must be separated out before any produce may be eaten or enjoyed. Fruit taken as the tithe from one tree may also represent the owner's other trees of the same species, but not of other species. A year's fruit may only be tithed for that year's harvest. Tu B'Shavat marks the beginning of spring in Israel. Now, we may be looking around at the cold and wet of an English winter, or for that matter, an American winter, or a European winter. But even though in Israel it may not be as warm as we might expect for what we think of as spring, what is happening in the natural world is significant, because at this time, sustaining rains should be at the peak of their power, and nature responds, brimming with buds of new, fragrant life. I've been in Israel in February, around the time of Tu B'Shavat that year, and already there were blossoms on the trees. The almond trees bud first, and they were really beautiful. To mark this moment, school children plant trees. Trees are planted, and these are usually provided by contributions from Jewish students abroad through the Jewish National Fund. Tu B'Shavat was celebrated at the cheder that I went to. Each of us donated a few dollars to plant a tree in Israel through JNF. So the first tree I personally planted was when I was about 7 years old. For Jews outside Israel, Tu B'Shavat is also a celebration. It's a celebration of the renewal of our vision, linking us with our homeland. And if you've never been there, start saving to make that first trip. Tu B'Shavat is a celebration of connections and connectedness to Jewish identity, to our land, to the natural world. Most importantly, Tu B'Shavat draws us close to the source of life itself, the one and only God, who is also our God and Creator. In the 17th century, Jewish mystics of Sfad developed a special Seder to mark Tu B'Shavat. Their efforts were influenced by the esoteric meaning in Devarim 20, verse 19, for man is like the tree of the field. Like the Passover Seder, the Tu B'Shavat Seder included 4 cups of wine, with varying percentages of red and white wine. The Seder included readings on trees and fruit from Jewish literature, and this new form of celebration spread from Sfad to Sephardi communities in Turkey, Italy, Greece, and later to those in Europe, Asia, and North Africa. Our celebration, whatever form it may take, speaks of the need for renewal, not only in the physical world, but in the spiritual world. In the beginning, we read in Bereshit 1, God created man in his own image, and God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. And God said, behold, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the earth, and every tree that has fruit. God presented humankind with the bounty of the earth he had created. He spread out before us the trees and all the vegetation, and he entrusted us with the creatures he had created. He gave us dominion, that is, authority, over all these things, along with the responsibility to care for them. What was his purpose in doing this? Was it so that man could misuse, abuse, and destroy all that was placed in his hands? So that man could pollute and taint and corrupt everything he touched? What God desired was that we should take responsibility for the plants and the animals, caring for and using them properly and with respect. We have historical evidence of man's ongoing misuse of the earth and its abundance. Under the rule of the Ottoman Turks, Muslims, in what was called Palestine, from the Roman Palestina, a name chosen to obliterate any remembrance of Israel, attacks on trees caused the residents to destroy every tree that did not produce a crop. Everything but olive and orange trees. Little was done to care for the earth because most of the owners were absentees. They rented their land to those who also didn't care about its proper management or fruitfulness because they had no relationship with it. People did not understand, and the absentee landowners owning most of the land of Israel did not care that the vegetation brought precipitation. Without trees, there was less and less rainfall and more wasteland. Only with the return of our people and the reestablishment of Israel has the barren soil been replanted with trees by Jewish National Fund and other agencies. Most Jewish people have had trees planted on their behalf, or have planted trees themselves in the land. I've personally planted many trees, and I've assisted in the planting of hundreds of trees, including some in the forest just below Yad Vashem. We as a synagogue have planted trees in remembrance of members who have passed away, and on every one of our trips to Israel, we have always planted trees. The chronicle of trees in the UK is also sad. Most of the forests in the UK were destroyed when landowners enclosed their land for the purpose of grazing sheep and planting crops. What was begun then was continued at the onset of the Industrial Revolution, when trees were used as fuel and more space was cleared to build factories. The majority of the trees remaining into the 20th century were used during World War I and World War II. No reforestation program has operated in this country, and it is only in recent years that the government and industry have seen to it that trees being culled were replaced. God holds man responsible for his actions towards the natural world. We are paying the price for our mistreatment of resources that God gave us, as we see the loss of elements which we cannot replace. The ozone layer, which protects us from the sun, is being eroded by our careless and cavalier behavior, making skin cancer and other human illnesses more and more common. In the land of Israel, once the land of the Canaanites, warring tribes who disappeared centuries ago, this land is described by the 12 scouts as a land of abundance, flowing with chalav v'davash, milk and honey, filled with vineyards and olive and fig trees, date palms, fields covered with grain, orchards, and every good thing. God gave this land to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yisrael, and their children forever. He promised the whole of the land to Abraham and Sarah and their descendants through Yitzchak. He promised the whole of the land to Yitzchak and Rivka and their descendants through Yaakov, whose name became Yisrael. He promised the whole of the land to Yisrael and his sons, telling them they would return from Egypt. He promised the whole of the land to the people of Yisrael as they left Egypt with Moshe. He promised the whole of the land to the Bnei Israel in the Midbar, even when we failed to trust him enough to claim the land he had given. He promised the whole of the land to Jews exiled in Babylon and Persia, telling us we would return from exile. He promised the whole of the land to our people when we began this final and most universal diaspora, from which we have been returning since the 1800s. He promised the whole of the land to our people when Mashiach reigns. The descendants of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yisrael will have all the land promised to us by God, and not merely a remnant of that land. God promised that the nation of Israel would prosper in Haaretz, the land. He promised that the land would be fruitful when our people were in the land, and only then. This land has never prospered when aliens lived in our land during the Babylonian captivity and for the nearly 2,000 years since Rome exiled and expelled our people. Here is a description of the land as it was when the first Aliyah began in the late 1800s. This is written by Mark Twain, that is Samuel Clement, in 1869. We traverse some miles of desolate country whose soil is rich enough but is given over wholly to weeds, a silent, mournful expanse wherein we saw only 3 persons. Part of the ground we came over was not ground at all, but rocks, where prosperity had reigned. but fallen, where glory has flamed and gone out, where beauty has dwelled and passed away, where gladness was and sorrow is, where the pomp of life has been and silence and death brood in its high places. There the reptile makes its home and mocks at human vanity, his coat the color of ashes, and ashes are the symbols of hopes that perished, of aspirations that came to naught, of loves that are buried. Chapter 47, Innocents Abroad. But here is the 1922 report by the Palestine administration, the Jewish administration of Palestine. It is gratifying to record a measure also of agricultural recovery. The area of cultivation has increased, and particularly the area of rotation and feeding crops of vegetables and fruit trees. Cereal cultivation in recent years has been little remunerative. The tobacco growing industry is making rapid strides, fostered by the favorable taxation, by purchase of the local leaf by local manufacturers, and by effective checks on smuggling. The orange season and the beginning of the year following improved methods of irrigation was unusually profitable. The afforestation program of our government is being furthered by the keen interest and active cooperation of the people themselves, to which a general celebration of Arbor Day, that's Tu B'Shavat, a festival of tree planting by school children, bears testimony. The resurrection of Tu B'Shavat and God's promise, the desert will blossom as the rose. Our people have taken this commission from God to care for our land very seriously, and not only in regard to the trees. We have seen the more than successful planting of non-indigenous crops like bananas, rice, and cotton. Israel leads the world in drip irrigation design. Reforestation has caused the return of rain and the refilling of aquifers. You might be surprised to know that Israel typically now has as much rainfall as the UK. Israeli scientists have developed hydroponics. Israel has engineered the use of brackish water, that is mixed salt and fresh, for irrigation. Israeli wines are consistent winners of international awards, and the production of olive oil has also been restored, sometimes in the very areas where our people produced olives and olive oil centuries ago. Israel exports fruit, flowers, vegetables, and herbs. Israelis have been personally involved in the welfare of the land and its vegetation long before it became politically correct to be green. Many Israelis have yet to realize that all good things come from God. Romans 1:20 says, "For the invisible things of God from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse, because when they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, neither were they thankful." God is the cause of Israel's physical restoration to the land. Although many Israelis have been involved in the outworking of his plan, God is the cause of success in repropagating the land and restoring its fruitfulness. It is God who sends the rain and provides the sun. It is only through God's goodness that Israel continues as a nation to this day, despite every attempt by Hasatan to destroy the land and the people of the land of Israel, the descendants of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. All that God has done in the land of Israel and with the people of Israel is for a purpose. Israel, in a very special and unique way, belongs to God. Israel, we're told, is God's inheritance in the earth. All that God has promised Israel will come to pass so that all people will know that our God alone is God. Israel's restoration and prosperity is being accomplished so that the name of God will be honored and glorified in all the earth. All this is happening as part of God's plan to restore the nation and people of Israel spiritually to our proper relationship with Him. More restoration and renewal is on the horizon when Mashiach returns to establish His righteous kingdom and tikkun olam, the restoration of all things. Torah compares human beings to trees. Trees go through cycles during their lives. The fruitful tree of summer divests itself of fruit in autumn and slowly loses its leaves. As winter descends, the tree stands shorn of foliage and seemingly dead. But when Tu B'Shavat comes, although the temperatures are still low and all vegetation seems frozen, the sap of the trees begins to flow. Sap rises slowly from roots buried in the hard soil, infusing renewed life into branches that reach toward heaven. In our lives, we go through similar cycles. Periods of renewal and growth alternate with times of seeming stagnation. This cycle is part of human life, which God created as He did the trees. But unlike the trees, human beings may become discouraged when spiritual advancement seems to cease. The trees know that such low periods will be followed by positive change, yielding new opportunities for growth. Trees do not become stressed because they trust in God's plan. And this is the message for us as we celebrate Tu B'Shavat. Winter is a time of physical lethargy, and we may also feel spiritually lethargic, lacking energy and vigor. Even when you feel you're in a rut and have lost the drive to move forward, there is no reason to despair or to feel discouraged. We need to think like the trees, remembering that periods of apparent lack of productivity are necessary. These are phases in the cycles of our lives. As spring comes, life-giving sap moves imperceptibly through the trees to the branches that are stretching upward. And we are reminded that they who wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. We will have renewed energy produced deep in our spiritual reservoirs through God's power, so long as we set our goals and our focus on the things of God and sink our roots deeply into His truth and His word. Here are a few more facts of life illustrated by nature, facts which those who garden might already know. There's a difference between trees and annual plants. Although trees require some regular maintenance, they produce fruit each year without any new planting. However, many plants, including vegetables, must be reseeded each year in order to produce. Human beings are like trees. With good maintenance, we may decline, but we do not need to start over from the beginning with each goal set. We can build on our past experience and relationship with God. The knowledge we have attained from experience and from study, by listening to exhortation and teaching, provides the impetus we need to develop further. But as with trees, we do require proper care, nurturing and watering in order to avoid spiritual damage and to encourage renewed growth. Allow Tu B'Shavat to inspire you. Look to the trees. Protect yourself from that which is harmful to your spiritual nature. Avoid activities and people who discourage your spiritual growth and advancement. Take the advice of the psalmist who compares us to trees. Tehillim 1. Blessed is the one who does not walk in the counsel of the ungodly, does not stand in the way of sinners or sit in the seat of the scorner, but his delight is in the Torah of Adonai, and in his Torah he meditates day and night. He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that brings forth its fruit in its season. His leaf shall not wither, and whatever he does shall prosper. Wishing you many blessings on Tu B'Shavat. Plant a tree. God bless you.